Over to you, Stuart. Thanks a lot.
Okay, so welcome everybody. So you can see my screen, Nick, yep?
We can, yep.
Yep, okay, perfect. Okay, so let's get going. I'm going to give you a whirlwind tour of Zdmp. For those of you who may have joined us in call one, you will recognize quite a few slides in the entire presentations by all of us. But obviously there are some new elements as well. So, you know, welcome back, but please pay some attention to the differences. So, my PowerPoint is not behaving very well. Okay, so welcome, as I said, to Zdmp. This is what the project is about. Unsurprisingly, you're familiar with some terms there: the right product at the right time, the right conditions, the right resources. So that's what we want to achieve in the context of zero defects manufacturing and the manufacturing environment in general. So this is a quick infographic of the entire project. We're quite a large project. We've got 30 partners. One of the interesting things is that around half of them are SMEs of various types, and around half of them are users. Okay, so we're quite a user-orientated project, I would say. But being a large project, we span many countries, etc. Interesting, we also have DIN, German standards. They're part of the consortium, and they're doing good work in European standards to kind of further some of our efforts there. There's a whole list of partners. Some names will be familiar, some not, but names such as, for example, Continental in Ford. We've got some very large players, and also some large companies such as Software AG based in Germany. Another interesting partner I'll talk a little bit about is a company we've actually formed within the partnership called I4FS, who joined our project about a year ago. So this is the detail of them all, and there's obviously details of each company on the web. It just gives you a little bit of a flavor of the countries and the intent of all these different partners. Okay, so what is our objective? We're what's called a platform project. So it's a platform, however you want to interpret that. And in our case, that platform is full of components to help you build things in a zero defects context. And that platform will also host applications which enable users to implement them and improve their products and processes. And the orientation of this core is more towards apps than components. So we're looking at the quality of the product throughout the supply chain, both within companies and across companies, using various techniques. We're not very kind of specific on just one thing, such as NDI or whatever. We don't really care. It's anything which enables us to improve product and process quality. And that improvement can be made by a range of developers or hardware manufacturers or technology specialists. I think you get the gist of it, and it's the same for the subcores as well. Whilst there is an orientation towards applications this time rather than components, still at the end of the day, we're pretty open of what kind of applications are developed. Somebody asked a question to me a couple of days ago about, is this just about AI? So does everything have to contain AI? And the answer is no. It can be relevant, but certainly there's no criteria to say you must include AI type techniques, but many of you I'm sure will. I talked about this being a platform project. This was launched in a European Commission call from about 3 years ago. And the things they wanted at a very high level: a platform building, large-scale piloting, ecosystem building, and standardization. So these are 4 things which are very important to the project, and you can guess all the subcores fit into ecosystem building. But we're looking for these other things as well, you know, piloting, standardization. These can be interesting topics. At a very high level, what is the platform? Well, we have a set of core services, things like storage, for example. Then there will be some specific services and components for product quality and process quality. They can be morphed into applications, and hopefully they can then be deployed by users in cloud or on premise to orientate their production. Where we are, the project is a 4-year project, so quite a long one. We're more or less 2.5 years in, or just over 2.5 years in. We're just about to get our third review, for those of you into these sort of things, and we're in a good shape. We're currently in the mode where the industrial pilots, which I'll talk about a little bit later, are just building up. And of course, the subcalls are ongoing, and we're now in subcall 2. So that was call 2. What I would say, if you haven't looked so far, we did have some winners from call 1. We had 10 winners, as we kind of predicted. So there is some top level information about them on the web. We can't go into too much detail. We are just finishing the contracting phase. We did that pretty quickly, I would say. And those projects are all due to launch on September the 15th. And they and you will have an obligation to do some dissemination. And no doubt most of the projects will come up with a website to tell you more about their interesting ideals. So what is the motivations and principles? Well, this is our kind of high level picture. Some nice terms there, but let me get into a little bit more detail. So the overall ideal is that zero defect manufacturers, they want solutions to their problems or necessary improvements. And also they might like to take them from, for example, the Zdmp marketplace, or they might want to request new or modified applications and components. We then have software application providers. So they are orientated towards ICT tools to find those solutions, to perform those solutions, which they will then upload as assets on the Zdmp marketplace. There may be other kind of linked elements of that as well. So for example, people providing machines for milling or for some testing or inspection. They may also provide data or maybe provide drivers. And in some cases, they will be software providers themselves. We also have service providers. They may implement or consult on Zdmp applications and are typically offering services to manufacturing organizations and manufacturing users. And then finally, we have the more, let's say, hardware orientated technology providers. So the software ones are on the right and the more hardware ones are related on the left. Hardware is not a massively strong point of the Zdmp project, but there are some elements to it as well. So the ideal is some kind of common buzzwords, let's say, which are orientated around our project. We're very open source orientated, but that doesn't mean to say you have to be open source, but a lot of the components we offer are open source. As you heard before, we're pretty SME friendly, or would it like to think we are, and hence all the people applying the SME must be in the lead. And of course, we want to go forward. This is an innovation action. So we want to make some business opportunities, and hopefully business opportunities including you all. So we have a marketplace to try to sell or eventually sell some of these interesting components and applications. This is the building blocks of the project, and you can imagine these represent various tasks and various work package in the overall scenario or the overall project. And these are the, let's say, the core of the building block components, which you typically would like to use, integrate, or validate in your particular project. You don't necessarily need to use all of them, but these are things which are available to you. These are top level concepts, and some of these break into further technical components which you can take advantage of. I mentioned we're in several sectors. The core was orientated to 2 sectors, but we actually provided 4. in terms of automotive, machine tool, electronics, and construction. So construction, I think, is a nice case. It's the ultimate factory. It's a pop-up factory, which then disappears, and actually the factory becomes the product. So this provides some very interesting cases, and actually is also interesting because it generally involves an awful lot of SMEs. We're also involved in cross-domain demonstrators, not only across the supply chain, but between different domains as well. For example, they sometimes have common machines, etc. When you bid for those of you who might have user-orientated pilots, there's no prescription. So just because we have an automotive case at the moment doesn't mean to say the automotive case is forbidden in what you do. Of course, we evaluate all proposals in the round against what we have in the project so far, but most definitely we're open to further developments in existing domains and also new domains as well. We also have an experimentation facility. We'll talk about that in a moment. And as part of that, we have a reference implementation, which we're putting together to show the system working in practice. Indeed, here is the experimentation facility. Interesting on this one compared to the first call, Sam from Tampere have added 3 or 4 nice longer kind of fly-through videos on this since the first time. So there's quite a bit more information, I would say, on this on the website for you to take advantage of. But there's one important difference as well. We will select only a maximum of 2 projects which use the experimentation facility. Okay, this time we already have 2, and we can only kind of cope with another 2 more. So that's a kind of poison chalice, I would say, for you. On the one hand, we definitely need projects which use the experimentation facility, so that gives you some advantage if you include it. On the other hand, we will only select 2. So there is a little bit of a gamble involved in there, but I think it's a good gamble. This is what our use cases look like. We've got an entire ecosystem, I would say. They hit process and product quality around each of them, but you can see there is quite a kind of set of different information chains and supply chains involved. It's not necessarily for you to simulate that, and indeed you can only have up to 2 partners in your consortium, but just to say that that can be interesting, but equally individual bids and kind of projects within one partner's domain is equally interesting. These are some example use cases. I'm not going to go through them all. There's quite a lot of information on this. There's a nice link below, not the best one, but I think it's on the publications page of the website. You can read more about a use case document. There's quite a large document on industry scenarios. This one's with Ford in Martin. They make engine blocks. Ford use the engine blocks. They are further milled by the ETXE group, and then Ford uses them in obvious places. And there's numerous zero defect techniques and processes which take place across there. We have a similar kind of setup in the machine tools and mold manufacturing situation. Another one, Continental, I think, is most famous for the tires, but they do a lot more. They do the instrumentation control panels. So here we're looking at this in the electronics industry. And I mentioned the construction case involving steel tubes, tiles, and overall building control. I also mentioned I4FS, so I4FS Industry 4 Factory Solutions. This is formed a basis of the initial proposal and now the project. So several partners within the consortium who wanted to get serious about exploitation of results. They formed I4FS. It was formed as a company about a year ago by 7 shareholders. 5 of them are in the project and 2 are actually outside the project, so slightly wider than Zdmp. But the ideal is the industry or I4FS will be the main kind of exploiter of the results of the project, beyond the individual partners themselves. So that's headed by Tony Bellin. The company's registered in the UK, but he's based in Spain. And you will have read in the guide for applicants that there is also an expectation that you exploit your Zaps via that marketplace as well. So here we are at call one. The key thing is, remember, it was components, but it is now Zdmp, although it's true to say also the line between them is a very fuzzy line, right? So indeed, I think quite a few of the calls, or maybe even the majority of the proposals in call one were kind of halfway between components and Zaps, but now it's more focused to Zaps, right? In other words, things the industry can actually use in practice. Nick will tell you more about this in a moment. You need to pick a particular topic, develop, integrate, or validate. Again, there's some fuzzy lines, and it's okay to do all of them, but you must focus on one particular area. And in reality, probably we expect maybe 60 or 70% to focus on the first area, and 15 to 20 in the other two areas. At least that's what we saw in call one, and that's what we predicted. And that's I would say that's our kind of target as well, but it depends on the quality of the applications. Please remember the website is there. There is quite a few different pieces of information and resources available, so do take advantage of that. People who failed were those who didn't read anything, basically, to cut it short. We have made the process as easy as possible. It's a very prescribed template. We've even half written some of the tasks for you to make it as easy as possible. So it's I think about 15 pages long or so, but please do stick to the template. One thing, if you are joining us now from call one, there are some changes. So first of all, anybody from call one, whether you won or lost, is welcome to submit again, and there's no restrictions on whether it's the same proposal, a tweaked proposal, or new proposal, or several proposals. But obviously, if you lost in call one, you probably lost for a reason. So you need to work out what that reason is and then try to improve it. On the other hand, as part of our policy, we don't give feedback. I mean, it's not so relevant for call two, but we don't give feedback for that. So you just have to review that yourself and kind of wonder why you lost. Be aware that the template is about 98% the same, but it's not quite the same. We learned some lessons from call one, and so we tried to simplify things a bit. So for example, the ethics and the declaration of honor forms are all embedded. You don't need to sign them. You don't need to make additional documents. There are a few other changes, but wade yourself through it and see. So Francisco's going to look at the technology a little bit later on. He's going to go through some of the components. We would like to think we're pretty good on documentation at this stage of the project, and there are various links to the existing components and existing documentation on the web. So please do take advantage of that. So for example, here's one for the application builder. You start to see there's a lot of text and information and graphics about what it is and how to use it. Indeed, because call one partners are coming up and running now, we have to have that documentation available. Don't forget to look a little bit and think about the I4FS marketplace. That's important. You might also find important that on the technology as a section of the website, there are details of Z applications which we're building in the project. Now, if you have something which is similar to these, then it's still possible to submit. Again, it's a bit of a gray line. We don't want to say, if it's vaguely similar, please don't bid. But equally, we don't want exact duplicates. But there can be many reasons why these are, even if you have something that sounds similar, it could be in a different domain, it could be use different technology, and that's all great. It expands our ecosystem. So that's my part over and done with. Probably a bit too long, Nick, but hopefully that's give you a flavor of Zdmp. I'll be back at the end for questions and some final hints, and then I will hand over now to Nick.
Great, thank you, Stuart. Okay, just a quick mention to Andreas. You've put a question in there that we'll come back to in the Q&A at the end and try to cover the answer to that for you, just so you know that we have seen it. Okay, so let me just share my screen with everybody. And hopefully you will all be able to see it very shortly. Okay. So can you see my screen? Let me just have a confirmation from someone.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Okay, so first of all, welcome. My name is Nick Fair. I work with the University of Southampton IT Innovation Group. We are managing the open calls, and the purpose of this part of the webinar is to just explain to you what we're looking for in the calls, some of the sort of rules, regulations and processes around it. Again, the same process as before. If you've got questions, please do pop them into the chat window and we'll try and answer them if we can then. If not, we'll come back to them at the end of the session. Okay, so first of all, what is the benefits to you of getting involved with Zdmp? Well, you've just heard from Stuart about what the project is aiming to achieve, and so we've got a sense of the size and scale of the project that we work on. So first of all, so really in one quick word there, it's all about the ecosystem. Clearly, we can't do all of everything by ourselves, even within the large consortium that we are. And we can't have all the knowledge ourselves. You guys have got products, ideas, and existing services and platforms, and together we can use those to grow a really comprehensive service for industries across Europe. And then as a result of that, we can help to expand your commercial opportunities, especially through opening up the Zdmp marketplace as another sales channel. And we can also potentially help you to attract further investment and generally altogether create a good sort of feedback loop between us and you in developing your products alongside helping to develop our products. And of course, from the funders' perspective, that's the European Union H2020 project, then this whole process allows the European Union funding to be distributed across Europe to new and developing businesses with good ideas and good products. So hopefully there's lots of good reasons for you to get involved with our open call. So what do we actually offer? In this open call, we're offering 15 to 20 projects at a value of 50,000 to 150,000 euros per project. You will have the chance to own and exploit what you produce from this. There are some minor restrictions that I'll come back to later, but on the whole, you're able to work with us and with the funding to develop your products and to exploit them in your own channels. And we won't take any ownership of anything that you produce. Of course, you can then to develop new working relationships with us and with other companies in the Industry 4.0 domain, including obviously those across our Zdmp consortium. We've got a range of project types that can suit your skills and experience. Stuart touched on those around the develop, integrate, and validate activity areas. So we're not sort of restricting or limiting this open call to any one type of company or project. And we will provide you with support throughout this submission period. Of course, this is the first of our support webinars, but we've also got our information hotline, or support hotline, I should say, email hotline. And then should you become a winning project, we've got many systems in place to support you in terms of technical support, preparing work plans, managing your projects. We'll assign you a mentor, and we've got lots of sort of technical documentation as well. So a quick overview of where we are. The overall, our open calls in this project total 3.2 million euros, but that's split over two separate calls. As you've already heard, the first one has closed and winners have been awarded. And we awarded 10 projects there at a total of about 1.1 million. So that means we've now got around 2.1 million euros available to distribute in this call. We are currently in the middle of the call period, and we've got about a month, but just under a month to go before it closes on the 1st of October. You can see the process we have here at the bottom. The call closes on the 1st of October. We then enter into an evaluation period where we will independently evaluate all of the proposals that have come forward that are eligible. And please be aware that the eligibility criteria do matter, and you will be checked against those as a first step. After that, we will identify the winning projects and award those projects, and then work with them in a contracting and work plan development phase. That's around November, December of this year, with a view to starting the winning projects from January of next year. So turning now to what we would like you to do. So there are 3 broad activity areas we would like you to submit proposals for. The first is development, the second is integration, and the third is validation testing. And I'll cover those in some detail. First of all, development. The aim here is to create new applications and solutions for the enhancement of the Zdmp platform, what we call here ZApps. So the applications are generally a combination of components. You heard Stuart talking about Z components and ZApps. And generally a component is a building block, which when put together forms a ZApp, much as you can see in the picture here. Just a quick repetition of anything what Stuart mentioned. We do want to try and avoid exact duplications of existing Zdmp ZApps that we are developing within the project. By exact, we mean in the same domain, performing the same function, using the same kind of components. So please do check out the link that Stuart showed you to the Zdmp applications page and have a look at what we're already developing in the project. The purpose of these ZApps and solutions, and of course the components and platform as well, is to provide new services to Industry 4.0 and to give the opportunity to you to build high quality applications by leveraging some of your existing functionalities and capabilities together with our Zdmp platform functionalities and capabilities. The audience for this type of development will generally be top technology providers and software developers, but it may also include research institutes and startup developers. And as mentioned, we've got 50 to 150,000 euros available per project. So the idea of development here is to look at developing new design time or runtime, zero defect smart manufacturing applications, developing new AI or machine learning applications or new or upgraded algorithms for zero defect processes, and developing or extending existing Zdmp ZApps to add value to the platform or to add value to the Zdmp ZApps as they exist. We are keen to reach into new Industry 4.0 domains. That's beyond our pilot ones that Stuart's introduced to you, but it's not necessary. And if you are within those 4 I4.0 domains, by all means do apply. But if you're active outside of them, that's great as well. Moving on to our second type of sub-projects, here we're talking about integration. So the aim here is to extend the Zdmp platform functionality by integrating or integrating with already existing component services or platforms that you may already have. Here, our target audience is the same as last time, technology providers and software developers, but it may also be companies of any size from the manufacturing or supply chains that can provide platform solutions that are suitable for integration, or who can integrate Zdmp components into your existing platforms or solutions. Again, it's the same funding amount per project. So here we're talking about connecting Zdmp, your platforms, your ecosystems, or your in-house technologies. And that could either be through a process of integration with third-party applications or services. It could be integration or interoperability, especially with existing platforms that you might have, including any micro platforms. And it might also be the integration of any ZApps or components that we produce with your third-party processes or components. So quite a broad range of integration opportunities there. Our third type of sub-project, that of validation, is one to try and test and validate the ZApps that we've already built. It may also be testing components of our platform in additional use cases or new domains, environments, deployment environments, such as in-cloud deployments or on-premises deployments. with the view to making sure the quality and functionality of the Zdmp offerings. And here, again, it might be technology providers, but also manufacturing companies of any size from the wider domain who are looking to deploy some of our existing applications and test them and make sure that they work. Again, the same funding amounts per project. So here we're looking at different types of validation. It can be functional validation, scenario validation, so we're looking at different domains, different deployments, or technical validations. And we can also be looking at performance testing and usability testing. So hopefully, given the range of sort of companies and people we have attending today, there is going to be at least one of these activity areas and one of these subsections of each activity area that fits with your sort of business models and development plans. If so, then you're perfect to apply for us. So the types of applicants we're looking for, as mentioned, we're looking for EU SMEs, and that includes micro SMEs, technology providers and software developers, again from the EU. We're looking for EU manufacturing and supply chain companies that could be of any size. I'll come back to the restriction on that in a moment. And it can be EU research institutes and universities. Obviously, I represent one of the universities from within the project. And there are two types of applications that we will accept. The first is a single applicant. So, you know, as it says, it's pretty clear, a single company meeting all the eligibility criteria, applying for a single project. Or you could form a small consortia. This would consist of a maximum of 2 companies. The lead company needs to be an SME. So that's very important. If you're going to form a consortium, it might be an SME technology provider joining together with a large manufacturer, but the SME provider must be in the lead and the large manufacturer must be in the secondary position. And that's the same the other way around, where you could have an SME manufacturer teaming up with a large software provider, but the SME manufacturer would need to be the lead in that consortium. Okay, to support you in the application process, we've got the dedicated email submission support hotline, which you can see the email for here. Cesare, you were mentioning earlier about contacting us by Skype call or so on. We're not able to do that, unfortunately. It would be much more effective for you to use the email here to send us an email with your questions, and we'll get back to you within 48 hours. We've also got a wide range of open call documentation to help you, including, very importantly, the guidance for applicants. That is the most important document for you to download and read and understand in full before we start completing the proposal template, which you can also download from the /resources webpage. But please, I direct you all to that guidance for applicants. It's the main document containing all the information that you will need. It mirrors a lot of what we're saying in this webinar, but please read it in full and make sure that you fit all of the eligibility criteria and understand exactly what you're applying for. We also have, as Stuart briefly showed you, quite a lot of information about our components and a list of the existing Z apps and a short description of what it is they do on our 2 web links you can see there. Again, please check those out. If you're planning on building your own Z app by using some of your components and marrying them with some of our components, it would be a very good idea to look in detail at the documentation for our components so that you can put together a really high quality and well thought out application. One of the things we noticed from our applications in call 1 was that there was a tendency for applicants to kind of list lots and lots and lots of our Zdmp components without really fully understanding what they do and how they related to their project. And those that tended to get awarded were the ones that had taken the time to read carefully about the components, to understand how they fitted with their own services or products or applications. And that meant they could then put together a more limited list of components, but a more accurate and detailed one. So that would be a bit of advice to you to spend some time understanding what we have available in terms of components and applications and really understanding how they can match with what you want to do. We've also got our application support webinars. Of course, this is the first one that you're here for. There is a second one this time next week. So if you missed anything on this, or you just want to recommend that some other people in your business attend and listen, then that they could attend the one on the 16th. Of course, as Jun told us, it is being recorded, and the recording will be up from Monday, so you can have other people in your company watch and listen to the recording anyway. We also have a fairly extensive frequently asked questions page up on our website. Many of these questions came out of our email hotline from call 1. And again, I strongly advise you all, before completing your proposal, to have a good look at the frequently asked questions page online. There's lots of useful information there. Some questions that you may have may already be answered in that page. That can save you having to email our hotline, because you can get the answer straight away. So please do take time to have a quick look at that. And of course, the website itself has got lots of information about Zdmp, about Open Call 2, and about the pilot use cases. Again, Stuart was bringing your attention to some of those in the first part of the presentation. Okay, in terms of the submission process, all submissions need to be made via the F6S website, and it's relatively simple. Once you've downloaded the proposal template from our site, you can then complete that template and upload it to this web address here. You will need to register with F6S if you're not already registered with them in order to do so. Some of the rules and regulations surrounding the proposal and the submission, these are all fairly standard things. I'll go through them quite quickly. Nothing's too complicated. You can apply more than once. It can be, the important thing here is that it is 2 different projects, and they need to be significantly different. And this also applies to anybody from who's planning to apply from Open Call 1. And let's say that if you're a winner from Open Call 1 and planning to apply again, your second project actually needs to be significantly different from the one you're funded for. We can't double fund projects. But if you do apply more than once, only your highest ranking proposal will be funded. We can't award 2 projects to the same company. In the proposal template, please answer each question in the template. If you think a question does not apply to you, that's fine, no problem. Just explain why it doesn't apply to you. If you just put an NA there, that doesn't help us to understand very much. So a short explanation will be very useful. Be clear and concise, and be very careful to respect the instructions about the length of each answer. You're welcome to use bullet points instead of full sentences if that helps in certain places, but be careful and don't make it all just bullet points. We need to understand your project, and we need to understand what you're proposing. So a combination of text and bullet points, but we don't expect huge long pages and pages of answers. And in fact, that's actually not allowed. In terms of how you pitch your application, then write for an informed audience, i.e. us and the external evaluators who will be looking at it. But remember, we're probably not experts in your immediate business area or your immediate market. So keep it informed, but also keep it understandable enough for somebody with a more general set of knowledge skills. You are able to include visual elements in your proposal. The proposal will be saved as a PDF and then uploaded to F6S. But remember that they will take up space, and you should be careful not to go over the page limits or space limits. Images still count towards those limits. Importantly, please don't include any external links. So the document must be self-contained. We can't or we won't follow links. For example, you might put a link to your own website, or you might put a link to some academic supporting documents or things like that. We're not going to follow those. We will assess your proposal entirely based on the PDF you upload as a self-contained unit. You must comply with all the eligibility requirements, of course. One of the most important ones being that your business must be registered within the European Union. We did have some businesses where some of the sort of offices and applications came from European offices, but the company itself was registered outside of the European Union, and that's a problem. So the company needs to be registered in the EU. Please check the eligibility requirements. They're in the guidance for applicants. And a summary of these rules and eligibility requirements are in the guidance for applicants here. It's called the G4A. So please make sure that you are familiar with those rules that I've highlighted here. Now, in terms of funding, it's standard EU sort of funding processes. In other words, we will fund 70% of costs to profit companies and 100% to non-profit organisations. A minimum of 70 to 80% of the call funding is for SMEs. The consortia are subject to the same restrictions that govern normal IA funding, and subcontracted parties. So if you do choose to apply as a single applicant, but with the plan to subcontract, then you can subcontract typically 100%. However, that's between you and the subcontracted party. And anyway, the standard rules around funding rates apply in all cases. Moving on to IPR, importantly, I think from your perspective, you will own the output of your open call activity, and you will be free to exploit them across your business with these few restrictions that we'll mention here. Firstly, where it is relevant, you will be expected to host your output on the I4FS Zdmp marketplace for 1 year after the end of the project, with any marketplace sales generating revenue for you and with a small commission for Zdmp marketplace. The exploitation on the marketplace during this 1 year period must be exclusive to the Zdmp marketplace. In other words, if you were planning to market through other marketplaces, that would not be permitted. However, of course, you can market through other channels that are not marketplaces, such as your own websites and so on. So it's only a minor restriction to being exclusive in terms of marketplaces. After that 1 year period is finished, then if you want to carry on hosting your outputs on the Zdmp marketplace, which would now be called the I4FS marketplace, then you'll just enter into bilateral negotiations with I4FS to agree the terms and conditions of that further hosting. And that would be between you and I4FS. And as was said here, if you can't reach agreements on that for any reason, then you will not be constrained any further. If you can, then great, we'll carry on working together to market through the marketplace. If you plan to undertake a validation sub-project, then the results of that validation, which will most likely be in the form of reports, need to be provided free of charge to anyone for a limited period after the end of the project. There is also IPR to consider in relation to some of the Zdmp components. Most components, or many components, are open source, but some are not. And you will want to review the IPR conditions on our websites on the /IPR for subcalls page, again, while you're writing your proposal, just to be clear in your own mind where the IPR rests in that regard. Okay, and that's it for me. And I think hopefully we've covered most of the areas that you were interested in finding out about there. I'll take some more questions on this at the end when we get to the Q&A. But for the time being now, I'll hand over to Francisco, who's going to tell you a little bit about the Zdmp technical part of the project.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Let me please share my screen. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yep, we can.
Okay. Okay. 1 second, please. I have too many screens here. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thanks for attending to this webinar. I'm Francisco, Technical Manager of Cdmp's project from ITI, and I'm going to show you an overall vision about the technical foundations and features of Cdmp that could be interesting for you in this open call. These are the objectives of this talk, basically to know key aspects on Cdmp architecture and know where to find more technical information, and know what components are available and their main features. And finally, a use case example. Well, in the first place, Zdmp uses intensively Docker and Kubernetes. And depending on what you are going to develop, the knowledge on that technologies is more or less required. Cdmp has components that hides the complexity of these technologies, but depending on your needs, you would need to know them. If you are thinking about machine learning, Cdmp provides several components that is the work and supports Python-based models and H2O-based models using Java. The technical foundations of Zdmp are basically these: is container first, extensible, distributed, composable, secure, and interoperable. Please check out these foundations in more detail using the link that appears on the screen, and these slides will be available later. And of course, you need to know how Cdmp works and which features are available for you. Well, this is the full architecture of Cdmp. As you can see, there are a few components. We will explain some of them more deeply later. And what I want to remark here is that Cdmp has two important flows. The first flow relates to the industry and the manufacturing process, in which the data is acquired, transformed, and computed using the edge tier. Once the data is ready, is pushed to the platform tier, in which is moved to the adequate subsystem for their processing or storing or whatever. Then the enterprise tier goes into action, aiding features like security and allowing the users to consume that data easily. This is the first flow. The second flow is more related to developers, data analysts, and in general to users that want to develop or create something into Cdmp. In this case, the entry point is the developer tier, in which users can use components to develop applications, machine learning models, or simulate conditions to make decisions. Of course, these components use again the layers described in the previous flow. If you want more information about the overall architecture, please use the link that appears on the screen. I think it's pretty well explained there. But remember that Cdmp is extensible, and this is where the CApps goes into action. A CApp is a software which consumes Cdmp core components to extend the Cdmp's features. That software could be only a frontend, which uses Cdmp's APIs, or can have more complexity, including their own backends or databases. This is what we expect from you in this open call: develop new CApps that will extend the Cdmp features, adding more value to the platform. Okay. Of course, the CApps has some interesting things. For example, it will be available in the marketplace. We have a marketplace in which every user can buy or use your CApp. You can build these CApps from scratch, or you can use the developer tools provided by Zdmp, like the application builder, or the AI and analytics designer. We have 4 or 5 components that can be used to build applications. Zdmp as project is building his own CApps, and you can check that CApps in the link that appears in the screen. Okay. Okay. But yes, for this, you need to know what are the features and the technical details of every core component of Zdmp. For that, you can access to software.cdmp.eu site, in which all the technical documentation related to components is available to consume. That includes also the open API specs and all the important things of every component. What to do the component, how do it, how to install it, how to use it, and what are the relationships between that component and the other components in the Cdmp architecture. There are also some fancy videos showing the features of every component. So just going to the site, click on Go to Docs button, and you can navigate through the left menu organized by tiers to know more details about the component. When you go into a component, you can find the table of contents in the right menu and a summary table with the main features of that component. I suggest you to see the videos of those components, interesting for you, because it's a good summary in 3 or 4 minutes and worth it. And of course, the open API specs are also available, okay? Before we get into detail of the components, let me tell you some key aspects of the architecture. In the first place, Zdmp has been built with security in mind. All the communications pass through the service bus. It's like an API gateway in which several security controls are considered. In addition, all the Zdmp components are continuously monitored in real time, including which processes are running and searching for security events and anomalies. And finally, the identity management and authorization of the whole platform is centralized using key cloud technology. This is the interface of the service bus, or it's an API gateway. As you can see, every request has several security checkpoints. Another key aspect of Cdmp is the data interoperability. The data acquisition is so important in the manufacturing process, and Cdmp talks the most used industrial protocols, specifically OPC UA, Modbus, CAN bus, and Profibus. For other protocols, a specific adapter is required. In this case, in any case, there are components in the Cdmp architecture that allows you to deploy these adapters easily. Also, Cdmp talks internally MQTT and AMPQ protocols widely spread in the industry, and this enables an easy integration. If you are thinking in artificial intelligence or machine learning, Cdmp also offers several AI technologies. You can use a set of opinionated algorithms and technologies that Cdmp brings to you based on H2O, Docker, and Python, or you can upload your custom AI algorithm based on Python. Okay, let's start to show some components features. The first one is the data acquisition component, which allows to manage external data sources and bring data into Cdmp. As we said before, talk several protocols like OPC UA, Modbus, CAN bus, or Profibus, but also can retrieve data from an API REST. Provides also a graphical interface which requires minimal to none code writing, and the underlying technologies here are Cumulosity from Software AG and Node-RED, a well-known low-code application. Once the data is acquired using the data acquisition component, usually needs to be transformed. For that, we can use the data harmonization component, in which you can design, manage, and execute data transformations and extract hidden value from data with semantic functionalities like ontologies and so on. In the screen's pictures, you can see an easy transformation of data. In this case, it's only a subset of the original data, but you can perform quite complex data transformations. Another important component is the service and message bus. The service bus is a central place for managing all APIs of the whole platform to apply global policies, and also provide several out-of-the-box features for APIs like versioning, analytics, etc. It's also known as an API gateway. We see it before, but just in case you find you can find the term API gateway in the documentation, and that refers to the service bus. Okay. On the other hand, the message bus provides a publish subscribe messaging to the whole platform. It's based on RabbitMQ and supports both MQTT and AMQP protocols. It's the preferred way to interchange data between components. And as developers of a C app, it's highly probable you will use it. But of course, it's not mandatory. I think there are no mandatory components at all. Virtually, all the components of Cdmp are executed in the application runtime, which is a component that provides an underlying generalist runtime based on Kubernetes and Rancher. And this is closely related also to Docker, as you probably know. This component brings scalability and versatility to Cdmp. Again, as a C app developer, you have a high probability that your C app will be deployed at the application runtime. But again, it's not mandatory. Your component can run in other infrastructure. Another interesting component is the portal component. This component provides common functionalities in a consistent way in all Cdmp, like a common login and logout or consistent navigation through components. Acts as a bridge between security components and other Cdmp components. The main security component in Cdmp is the secure authentication and authorization component, which provides a centralized management of users, roles, user groups, etc., to manage access to protected resources easily. Also provide context-based authentication. That means an additional authentication factor asked to the user if the context of the user has changed. An example, we can bring 2FA authentication automatically if the context of the user has changed. For example, I'm logging from Spain, and in the next second, I'm logging from UK. My context is different, and probably I need to use another security measures. Other important security component is the secure installation, and you will use probably this component as a C app developers. This component provides configuration and permission checking to new components in Cdmp architecture. So you probably will use this component to install the C app in the platform. Of course, the persistence of the data is a common requirement. For that, you can use the storage component, which provides predefined databases ready to be consumed by components. The available databases are MySQL, PostgreSQL, and MongoDB, and also provides a distributed cloud-ready file system to be consumed also by components. In this case, the underlying technology is Hadoop. Finally, also provides an API to consume these services based on Apache Knox, which have a well-documented API. I think I have the wrong slide. Sorry, this is the storage. Okay, if you are thinking about machine learning, you should check out the following components. This one is the AI and Analytics Designer, which allows users to build machine learning scripts easily, automating machine learning workflows, which includes automatic training and tuning of many well-known algorithms. AI Designer is based on H2O and AutoML technologies. In the AI Analytics Designer, you can define a machine learning algorithm, but is the AI Analytics Runtime component, which transforms that algorithm to be executed inside Cdmp. Okay, so this component provides an automatic deployment into Kubernetes of AI-based models and seamless integration with several Cdmp components like the service and message bus, authorization and authentication, etc. In other words, hides the software engineering complexity to the data scientists. Not only allows deployment of models from the AI Analytics Designer, but also from another machine learning related components based on Python. A good, this is how the interface of the AI and Analytics runtime. You can, well, you can check out in the documentation. A good entry point to Cdmp is the application builder component. This component helps developers to create C apps using drag and drop, and provides easy integrations with Cdmp core components and several out-of-the-box features like the internationalization, logging, telemetry, or packaging your C app. Summarizing is a specific IDE for Cdmp-based projects. We have other components. I think we can be here all the afternoon. Sorry, I think we can be all the afternoon talking about components. We have the human collaboration component, which has a GitLab which provides continuous integration and continuous delivery. Also, question and answers interface. It's like a Stack Overflow particular to Cdmp, and we also provides some kind of calls between teams, videos, etc., etc. Okay, so this is another interesting component. We have the orchestration designer, and runtime provides a design interface to create BPMN flows. It's pretty easy to use, and you have really a lot of components. You have here all the links of the components of Cdmp, and I want to finish this talk sharing with you an example of use of Cdmp. Okay, let's imagine that we want to perform an anomaly detection in our manufacturing process. The first step will be to acquire the data from the production line. If our production line talks the same protocols as Zdmp, which is highly probable, you can ingest that data directly using the data acquisition component. If not, you will need to deploy a custom connector to transform the protocols of your production line to a protocol that Zdmp understands. Once the data is acquired, you can use the data harmonization component to transform that data to be easier to consume, reducing the size, ignoring the useless data, etc. Once the data is transformed, can be stored in databases using the storage component, or can be pushed to a topic of the message pass component via MQTT or AMQP protocols. That's the case of this example. The data is pushed to a topic of the message bus, named, for example, data to detect anomalies. And the product assurance runtime, which is the component that performs the anomaly detection, is watching that topic and retrieves the data at the time it is available. This component performs their operations, in this case using machine learning, and when the result of the anomaly detection is ready, this result is passed to another topic of the message bus, named, for example, anomaly detection results, in which every component interested on that results will be subscribed. That's the case of the monitoring and alerting component, which is subscribed to the anomaly detection results. So at the time the data is available, it's consumed by this component. Monitoring and alerting reads the result, and if the result is anomaly detected, creates and sends an alert to the CApp anomaly detection, which shows the alert to the adequate users, for example, an operator of the production line. Of course, behind the scenes, there are a lot of components involved, like the security authorization, authentication, application runtime, AI analytics runtime, etc. Okay. So, well, this is the example, and that's all I wanted to share with you in this webinar. Please remember that you have the documentation ready at software.cdmp.eu. Thanks for your attention, and I want to hand over to Nick to continue with this session. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Francisco. I hope there was a very good and comprehensive look at things, but as I say, do take your time to learn these things for yourselves as well. Okay, I think we're now going to move into an open floor question and answer session. We've had a few questions come up in the chat and during the presentation that we've tried to answer, but here's an opportunity now for everybody to type in their questions into the chat. We'll read them out loud, and one of the three panelists, or indeed some of the other people involved with the project, will chip in and answer your questions to the best of our abilities. To begin with, though, I'd like to suggest that we start with questions relating to Zdmp project itself, and some of the things that Stuart was talking about way back at the beginning of the webinar. So if you've got any questions around what is Zdmp, what's it trying to achieve, how is it organized and things like that, pop them into the chat now. I'll give you a minute or two to start putting questions in. If I haven't received anything after about a minute, we'll move on to the next section, which will be questions about the open call itself. Okay, so any questions you have, please put them into chat now.
This is Stefano Nick. It's worth saying that we are going to answer only general question like, would this fit, would that fit with the project? Probably are too detailed to be answered here in the webinar and also via email. So please, any question, make it of general interest and not just for your own benefit, if possible. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Stefano. So yeah, we're not able to answer specific questions about your individual proposal. For example, you might want to say, my plan is to do X. Do you think this is good for your call? We can't answer that type of question because it would be unfair on other applicants. And also, we don't have that specialism. So yeah, please, by all means, do add in your questions to the chat now if you have any. I'll give you 30 seconds to a minute to do so. Thank you. Okay, we've had one question coming from Albert, thank you. It says, in the call subsection 5.3, task number setup, what should there be written? In what detail should we describe the technical setup? Okay, so that's referring to the proposal template, I think. Is that right, Albert? Yeah, so Stuart, over to you on that one.
Thank you for that, Nick. Okay, now I have to remember about the template we wrote many months ago. So of course the template is the same for all types of call, whether it's develop or validate or integrate, right? So we kind of try to make it very generic. But I think there what we're looking for is that, you know, particularly perhaps if you're involved with some experiments or you're involved in some user trials, which you might have a user in your consortium or you might be doing something internally, there may be a need to configure machines or software or install something. So that is a generic word trying to cover those aspects.
Thank you, Stu. Yeah, so the question is referring particularly about the detail. In reality, Albert, we're not expecting you to have understood every part of Zdmp, every component and every aspect. So the detail there is not expected to be sort of complete or very, very deep. However, obviously, the more you're able to be precise within, you know, we will understand you can't be precise in an application proposal. You know, the scoping out of this sort of stuff happens if you win and once the project begins. But within those constraints, the more detail you're able to provide, the more clearly the evaluators will be able to understand your proposed project, and therefore the more likely they are to be able to score it effectively and well. So yeah, we're not expecting a full understanding and lots of depth, but obviously the more you can, the more precise you can be, the better on the whole.
So Nick, so Albert just added a little bit more. So of course, you know, the scope of your proposal could be wider. But for example, you say, well, you know, if I'm providing just an algorithm, is there a setup of that? Well, maybe, maybe not. You know, there could be some learning involved. But actually, I would have thought there would be little setup in terms of if that is only what your proposal is about. But you know, it could cover that. You then say, should it go into mathematical detail? I think what you have to remember, and everybody should remember, you know, the proposal is about 15 pages long. Most of it is quite prescribed, and there's really, as Nick suggested, not much detail you can go into. Right? You've only got so much time. What we're looking for in the evaluations is the kind of big picture thing, because that's all you can do in 15 pages. Otherwise, we would have asked you to write 100 pages. So we're looking for interesting proposals which add to the Zdmp ecosystem and which fulfill all the different criteria Nick has gone through. We're not going to evaluate it in the kind of case you give to say, is it an optimal mathematical formula? No, we're looking at, you know, does this proposal match the big picture of what we need and expect in Zdmp?
Yeah, so in general, Albert, we would be much more interested in what your algorithm plans to do rather than the mathematics on which this is built. Great, thanks for your question, Albert. Any more questions from anybody else? We'll open it up now to questions about, seeing as we've moved on to talking about the open call itself. So any questions around the open call, around the proposal template, around any of the rules and regulations, and also if you've got any technical questions to pop in, please feel free to do that now as well. Again, we'll give you a few seconds, minutes to write your questions in. Thank you.
Okay, Nick, shall we wrap it up? And if we see any more questions, we can take them as we go, yeah?
Yeah, it seems that, here we go, we've got one that's popped in. So again, Albert's asked, does it make sense to download all the Docker containers and try to understand their details in advance before knowing if we would win the call? So maybe that's one for Francisco. Is it worth exploring the Docker containers at proposal stage?
Well, whoa, you will have a lot of work there, but yeah, I think could be a good idea to check out these Docker containers and see if you can run it and understand how it works. But if, in my opinion, if you don't want the call, why you're going to? I don't. If for me, it's not necessary. Because in your description of your C app, you only know at high level how the component works and what are their features. You can do it, and for me, I think it's a good idea, but it's not strictly necessary to do it.
And just to be clear, do applicants have access to the Docker containers, Francisco?
Sorry, the audio was chopped. I don't understand, Unique.
Do the applicants at the application stage actually have access to the containers?
In fact, no, the containers are in, you're right, Nick, I forgot that. The containers are in a private Docker container registry and are not accessible for the public, but we can consider if you want to check out one specific container, we can give you the access to that or something else. I don't know if I'm saying something wrong.
I think this is Stefano. I think that's no. The simple answer is no one will have access to anything but documentation. This is also to provide a level ground to all the applicants. So in theory, we can. There is some code, some Dockers that are already mature enough to be shared. And at the end of the day, they're going to be released as open source. So there is not a problem of sensitivity there, business sensitivity, but there is the intention to have a level ground field for all the applicants. So the applicants will only have access to documentation, interface documentation and feature documentation. And based on that, they need to understand if a component is of their interest or not, and how to interact with them. Also, because going back to what Stuart said, we want high-level information. So we don't really need to go to describe a REST interface, anything like that in your application. It's much higher level than that.
Yeah.
So
if I play devil's advocate slightly, I mean, let's say submitter could argue to say, well, we need a bit more detail on the technology because, you know, we might submit something, we might not put things together in the right way, we might even then win, and we might not be able to build it. Right? All of which is theoretically true, but I would class that under the category of luxury problem. In a worst case scenario, you know, when you do have that access and come to the kind of negotiation phase where we check the proposal out in detail and make sure everything is plausible, and we do a few financial checks, you know, when you learn a little bit more, you might come to the conclusion that a component or components or the technologies is too difficult for you, or you don't know what Docker is, or many different things. And of course, you always have the opportunity to drop out during that phase. So as such, I think, you know, Francisco's answer is kind of right, which was, you know, it would be good, but ultimately, since this is high level, for you to really, even if we gave you access, for you to really explore something, it would take quite a bit of your time. And ultimately, we're going to be judging it not on your exploration, we're going to be judging it on the ideal. So to focus on the ideal, and then you'll make your process more efficient for yourself.
Great, thank you, everybody. I think Albert put it nicely when he says, okay, so if I have no access, then I can't download the containers. There's the answer. So I think that's spot on. Okay, any more questions from anybody else? Again, I'll give you 10 or 15 seconds to pop something in, and then we'll start to look to wrap up the presentation. I know it takes a bit of time to type things out, so I'll give you, as I say, a short while to do so. Otherwise, we'll look to finish it here. Okay, question. Okay, around impact and exploitation. The question is, it is not a scientific call, so do you expect to publish the contributions also in the scientific world, for example, at conferences? And I guess that would also mean journals and things like that. So I'll answer that one. The answer to that is any kind of dissemination work is actually welcomed, and we would expect each sub-project to have a dissemination plan And part of that plan very much would include publications in scientific journals or academic journals, or attendances at conferences or at trade events and workshops at present and things like this. Zdmp itself is active in doing these things. We have our own program of publications in journals. We have our own conference attendance programs, and we have our own sort of workshops at various trade fairs and things like that. So in answer to that question, it's not expected, i.e. it's not a mandatory requirement, but what is mandatory is to have some idea of a dissemination plan. And certainly we would accept publications in conferences and journals as a very valid part of a dissemination plan. Does anybody else want to add to that?
This is Stefan. Yes, any type of dissemination is welcome. Let me just say that the structure of the proposal, however, needs to have an impact, an immediate impact on the industry. So whatever you're proposing should be relevant and applicable in very short time, meaning months, 1 year, not much down the line. So if you are familiar with the technology readiness level that the DEC uses a lot, here we are talking of things that are at level 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, something that is blue sky research and that you would fund a PhD on is probably something that I would not put in a proposal, because that will not be relevant, immediately relevant for the domain, and so not seen in a very positive spin by the reviewers. You can have research in whatever you propose, and that's welcome, but the type of research we are looking for must have a short-term impact on the industry. That's the key. So academic publication, you can still do academic publication around that, but it's not a PhD thesis. Just to be clear on what we expect to be the core of your proposal in terms of addressing research versus impact and business.
Thank you, Stefano. Yeah, that's a good distinction to make between impact and dissemination. And yeah, the impact needs to be short-term and on the industry. The dissemination could include publications in journals and the like, so long as the impact criteria match with our expectations. Okay, again, another chance for people to put in some questions, and give another 10 seconds or so. And then I think we'll, looking at the time, we're just about nearing our hour and a half. So we'll start to wrap up very shortly. A few more seconds and then we'll call it a day. Okay, we haven't had any more questions come in. If you manage to get one into the chat while I'm still talking away here, we'll answer it. So thank you all very much for attending. I hope this webinar has been useful to you.
Nick, don't forget I've got this slide at the end.
You have another slide to present, Stuart?
Yeah, same as last time.
Oh, okay, yeah. By all means, go ahead and wrap up.
Okay, so you should see my slides in design mode, yep.
We do.
Okay, right, so just a couple of slides to wrap up. It's really a repetition of things you've heard before. We're keen to implant these things in your brain as much as possible. So these slides are a bit dense, but do pay attention to this stuff. So first of all, the proposals must be led by an SME, a can be other people involved, other SMEs, other companies, other universities, but there can be only a maximum of 2 altogether. There's no real judgment whether a proposal with 1 partner or 2 partners is better or worse. It very much depends upon the context of the individual proposal and what you're trying to do. So focus on one activity, but don't think, just because you're doing, I don't know, development, you can't do a bit of validation, right? You must have focus, but some kind of coverage of other aspects, if it's sensible, can be very good. In terms of the components use, then that will be quite variable, maybe between whether you're developing applications or you're validating something, and it also depends upon the context of what you're doing, right? You can use as many or as less as you want. I guess we think probably that between 3 and 6 is probably a sensible number. It's even feasible you could use none in the right case. I can think of a case, but we don't absolutely exclude it. Equally, as Nick suggested, we did get some proposals which said they would use all the components, which might be great for validation, but is that really credible for a development exercise? I mean, it might even be credible, but then is it achievable, right? So you should be sensible. Simply pleasing us because you think we want all our components to be used, probably actually we will think you're just a bit too optimistic. When you bid, what will happen if you finally win? We will talk to you, we will contract you, we will ask you to update some parts of your proposal. We will consult with technical advisors in the project and make sure people's understanding of the components are right, and we may actually fine-tune them. So, the overall sense of what you will eventually develop must be the same, but some of the technicalities we might have to tweak a little bit to make sure they're achievable. So don't be kind of frightened that you have to get absolutely everything perfect right now. On the other hand, if you say you will do X and Y using 5 components, and then suddenly the end game is you only need to use 1, that would be a bit more of a problem. So all that says we want credible, achievable proposals. What we don't want is invented, promise everything once. In other words, I would say we want kind of less but more, more constrained, but we want it to be more exploitable and have more impact. Essentially, it should be as near working as possible. A lot of our stuff is based on open source, but it's not compulsory. Okay, so do bear that in mind. And there's a lot of IPR information available on the components in any case, and if you have any uncertainties of that, that is something you can ask us about. There are no restrictions on the types of technology or the the programming language or what type of zero defects kind of processing product areas it looks at. We as long as it fits the overall strategy and principles of the project, everything is considered. Somebody asked a question on sectors. We have 4 sectors, but there's no restriction. In fact, we've got some KPIs on additional sectors, but equally extension of the existing sectors is good as well. So in general sense, throughout our whole kind of definitions, we're trying to be as open as possible. But of course, there are 2 restrictions. It must be loosely related to manufacturing, and it must be related to zero defects. So, for example, food production. Well, food production is kind of manufacturing, right? But some elements of food production are not manufacturing. So it very much depends upon context, but in general, it's quite open. So the template, please make sure you use only the template. Please make sure you use only F6S. So I think most people did that. They tended to abuse it a little bit, but make sure you do. 2 statements there. This is the most important one, I think. Be sure to read the guidelines for applicants, all right? Be sure to read it. If you don't read it, if you don't look at it, you will lose, okay? If you do have questions, as Nick suggested in one of the chats, first of all, you need to read guidelines for applicants. Secondly, you need to look at the FAQ, which is also in the guideline for applicants, but there will be updates on the web as well. So you might like to look at the FAQ, particularly a couple of days before the end of, or a couple of days before you submit, just in case there's any final updates on there. And finally, if you get no answer, please send us an email. Actually, I noted that this time, partly maybe due to holidays, we got a lot less questions via email up to this point in time, because obviously we tried to put our knowledge from the first call already in updates to the process and put these things on the web. So hopefully we've answered most questions, but if not, please do mail us. This is the point Stefano was mentioned earlier. We won't provide specific answers on the suitability or help finding partners or who should lead. You know, anything which is specific to your peculiar case, it will be down to the evaluators to assess it. The extra forms in call one, we did have extra forms on declaration of honor and ethics. These are not separate forms now, but they are in the overall proposal, but you don't need to sign anything. So this should be simpler. And indeed, you know, remember, if you bid for call one, call two is not quite the same as call one. It's not the repeat again, but an awful lot of it in terms of process and in terms of structure, and to an extent, the scope of what you bid for is quite similar. Don't remember to submit on the 30th of April. That is something I changed. The deadline is, correct me if I'm wrong, is the, let me just change that just in case anybody sees that one. 2nd of October, Nick, isn't it? Yeah.
1st of October.
Sorry, 1st of October. Let me change that one very quickly. So do remember to submit it on time. Final slide. This is some kind of lessons in which I put together from call one. These are things that basically caused us grief, okay? And it caused the failure, I would say, of some proposals. So again, the guideline for applicants, right? And really read it. You know, we have some questions whereby clearly people had probably read about the first 3 pages of the guidelines for applicants. You know, they asked questions which were very, very clearly answered, and they still ask the same thing. So, you know, you've got to do your job as well and read the documentation. If you read the FAQ at the back of it, probably 80%, I think, of any of your questions will be answered. A lot of these were asked in the first call, so this will be successful here. Just a side point, what I noticed in call one is that the first couple of webinars we did, it was a bit like this one. There weren't many questions at the end. But in the third webinar we did, there was, I think, about an hour of questions at the end. So what you might want to do is also not necessarily attend the webinar next week, I think it is, but maybe just look at the questions at the end of the webinar when it's published, because there might be some further issues you can take advantage of there. As a general principle, and this is just a natural principle, right? Unless it says it's forbidden, it's kind of allowed, yeah? So we are very careful what we answer, particularly in the context of proposals, but we have to work to our own rules. So, you know, if we say there can be only a maximum of 2 applicants, there can be only a maximum of 2. But if we don't say something, it means it's quite flexible to you, but ultimately the evaluators will judge that. Nick mentioned one of the, I think quite a number of people failed the initial appraisal in the first call, you know, because they submitted from a country which wasn't applicable, or their base location was kind of actually in the wrong location. So, you know, that's just an example, but what a waste of time if you spend, you know, 2 days writing a proposal if you'd have only spent 5 minutes more reading some of the information we gave you, you would have either submitted as a different entity or not submitted at all. Stick to the template. You know, it's quite amazing when we say, you know, write 1 page or write 1 paragraph, and then people write 3 pages. No, it's not what it means, right? We will ask evaluators to assess any deviances on that. So stick to what it said, because then it's fair for everybody. We cannot, no matter how you kind of twist the question when you email us to try to get any information out of us, anything which says, you know, do you think our suggestion is a good idea? Do you think we should do it this way or that way? You will simply get a response to us which says, we cannot answer that question, do as you think best. This will be assessed at evaluation time. This is to make sure we're fair across all people. The proposals that won, I think there were actually a lot of good proposals, right? So I can't remember the exact statistics, but there were, you know, a large number of great ideas. But why some of them failed is because they didn't present it very well. They weren't the best written. They weren't complete. They were maybe too terse with the answers. And obviously, as an evaluator, you kind of want to judge on as much information and as well written information you can get. So please do check your proposals, but equally don't invent stuff. You know, if something is clearly not applicable, you know, say it's not applicable. Just 1 sentence can be fine to say why it's not applicable, right? Don't make up stuff to fit a section of the proposal which is not relevant to you. So those are a couple of tips. So the final slide is that one. I tried to find something without an American flag and a European flag, but that proved a little bit difficult for landings on the moon. You know, the opportunity is yours. We've already got 10 proposals coming up on board in about a week's time, so we're really excited about that. We hope all your proposal submissions can be, you know, good. The call money this time is double. The kind of, I don't know if statistically it means it, but it means the chances, it doesn't really mean the chances are double because it depends on how many submit, but there's 20 more spaces available. Let's put it like that. So I think you have a good opportunity of winning for relatively low work. I think it takes maybe a day or 2 days to write a proposal, and for quite a high amount of money. If you think 150K funding, you know, if this was a typical European Commission 3-year project, this would be nearly the equivalent of 600,000. So it's proportionally, it's quite a large amount of money, funding, and you need to maybe think about your resources as well, because it can be difficult to spend that amount of money in that time, surprisingly enough. So that's the end of the session. Unless anybody from my colleagues want to say a final word, we hope to see your.
Stuart, if I can pick the questions from Albert and make it general, it could be relevant because we have seen many not understanding that very well. So what is a KPI? A KPI is a key performance indicator. It's something that you measure. And basically what we are asking you is along the line of how you can, at the end of the day, understand that you are achieving what you want, what you promise within the project. So KPI can be technical, like 10% less defect or response time 10 seconds quicker. It can be business. The example in the chat is about dissemination that is less relevant, like presenting the work in 2 conferences is a KPI that you would describe as a dissemination KPI. But it's important, the key part is that your KPI must be measurable. The way to measure it can be quantitative or qualitative, but they must be measurable. And you need to tell us what you think you would consider a success. Because you can say a reduction of 1% of a given attribute is a great achievement and you can win the Nobel with it in one case, or a reduction of less than 20% doesn't really matter because the attribute is different, because the content is different, the problem is not as complicated as the first one I was describing, and so on. So you tell us in the KPI section what is a success and how we can measure it. So I hope this is of general interest. Sorry if you already knew about it.
Thank you, Stefano. Great, thank you, Stuart. Overall, I think we've probably covered everything perhaps multiple times. I'm sure everyone's quite keen to head off at this point. For all of those who've stayed to the end, thank you very much indeed. Albert, thank you for your questions, and we're grateful to you for actively participating. And everybody else, Andre, I think we had a question, Cesare, we had a question from you as well, so thank you all very much for contributing. And we will look forward to seeing some really good proposals from you by the end of the proposal period on the 1st of October. So good luck, everybody, and thank you, and bye-bye.
Hey, thanks, Nick.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye.